What's up, rock fans? Chris back here in the Rock and Roll Garage. Just kind of thought I would read my own little thing I put together here about being Gen X. Gen X, we weren't raised by influencers. We were raised on records and radio. In the late 70s, the world felt tense. Things were going on. Cold War, economic mess, divorce, climbing, you know, we were the first latchkey kids. We came home to empty houses and loud stereos. That's what I did when I got home. If there wasn't nobody around, I'm getting on Dad's stereo. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, I'm going to get on Dad's stereo and jam some records and annoy the neighbors a little. Some things that I'd love to throw on, some Black Sabbath, some Led Zeppelin, Van Halen for sure. It was a great time to be alive. There was a lot of music going on. You had punk, coming through and just ripping the place apart. The Ramones, the Sex Pistols, Buzzcocks, the Dead Boys, the Clash. Well, the Clash kind of like was the breakthrough kind of punk band I always felt. The Ramones were always like there, but they'll tell you that they played simple music and just kind of did their own thing, or they really loved surf music. So that's the Ramones, And then as you got older, you had to figure out what what was going to be your identity. What was your identity? Were you going to be a punk rocker? You're going to be a new wave kid? You're going to be you'll be a metalhead? Well, I chose metalhead, so we all know where that goes. But I'm not saying I didn't like those other things. And then came MTV. Well, MTV shows up, I want my MTV. And that really changed, the scene at the time. They really punched a lot of new wave and new music into your, right in your face. It's right there on your TV. You just watch it. You go watch your favorite band play their song. Yay. It was amazing. As you went through the 80s, of course, like I said, I was a metal fan. I love metal. I still am. I love rock and roll, all the old 70s, Deep Purple. I just named thousands of UFO, the new wave of British metal, Diamond Head, was kind of rattling off bands that I know. But yeah, so, it was important to us. We needed the music. It became our identity, it became who we were. And we were good. We were figuring things out. We were making it happen on our own. Like this stupid little podcast I'm doing. Obviously, I threw some new lighting together, kind of make it more interesting instead of just some stale lighting that's shooting off from top of the old Rock and Roll Garage, So, we figured things out, kind of, pretty stripped down what I got going on here. I got a trouble light that's got a plastic shopping bag over it so it diffuses. If you look back over there, my little blue spotlight over there, can you see that? That's that's supposed to be in my yard. But anyway, so, again, just out here trying to promote the good stuff about rock and roll. Just thought I'd just jump in there for a second and shout at you guys. So remember, music's important, super important to Gen X. Helped us get through those times when, we had to duck and cover. Anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for listening. Peace.